Hello, everybody. Welcome to SupplySide East. Welcome to New Jersey. Welcome to New York, right? Todd Runstead here. I'm the content director for Natural Products Insider, SupplySide. And we've got a really cool program right now for the next hour. This is going to be thrilling and amazing both. We're going to talk about the science and the business of aging, because the science of aging, particularly longevity, has been riveting ever since Ponce de Leon and probably beyond that. And being in America, we want to make money off it. And so we're going to cover both the science and the business of this. So I am really excited about that. I'm going to introduce our speakers, but before, there's some housekeeping notes, and the slide for the housekeeping notes is right here. And let's see. Oh, so in case you haven't figured it out, the Wi-Fi, SupplySide East 24, and the password ingredients online, which is also a sponsor, no doubt. Show's only open till 3:30 today. That's it. Oh, and there's this really cool, I was checking this out earlier, there's a headshot lounge back and to the right where you can get professional photos taken of yourself. They shoot like a half a dozen of them by professionals, and then they'll email them to you. So you have a brand new LinkedIn profile picture. So you could do that. There's also bagels and bubbly brunch. Are we serving booze? Bonus. That's how we roll here at SupplySide. And then there's also the women in nutraceuticals. Nope, you're not going to be able to catch that. I was just there before, and that ends in about 15 minutes, and no one can leave until 1. And then there's also the speed networking, which is a really fun thing, and you can do that right when this is over. And it's a good chance to meet more people. Amanda is hobbling in the house. Oh, we can definitely begin now. So now, this is important, everyone. Get out your phones and scan this QR code. And this is important because, A, we get to play games, and B, this is how you ask questions. And you can ask questions at any time. We're going to take the questions at the end, so in like 45 minutes, but we're only taking the questions that you pose on this. So if you do the QR code, you see the SupplySide East thing, and here's that, and then you'll see at the top, there's like the little Monopoly house on the left, and then there's the thing in the middle, and that's where you ask your questions, and then the little, look, so you're already starting. What is the most important aspect of healthy aging for the supplements industry? Go. Your answer now. Oh, look, and the horse race is on. It looks like cellular wellness. Cellular wellness. I didn't even know if that was going to be it. Oh, cellular wellness is lagging a little. Oh, no, it's doing pretty well. It's around the 40%. Here comes cognition. Cognition coming in at 30, 35% here. We only got about 5 more seconds. Oh, my God, it's a tie. Who's going to break the tie? Who's going to break the tie? All right, it's a tie. So cognition and cellular wellness, more important than cardiovascular health, even though it's the #1 killer. Okay, and now question number 2. We have 3. What's your favorite ingredient for healthy aging? NAD plus precursors. Have we got the speaker for you? This is going to be fun. But omega-3 is the famous Swiss Army knife ingredient. Oh, and now it's in 3rd. And collagen, come on. I'm really surprised that collagen continues to grow in double digits for like 6 or 7 years running. There seems to be no end to the collagen boom. And so you got to like those peptides. And CoQ10, come on. And it's NAD+. Dr. Yasmeen, oh man. Kids, you've come to the right place. And so now, finally, the last question. What is the price point you would pay? Now, we know ladies will pay almost anything for cosmetics, for little things like that. Pay $80 or $100. Yeah, that's right. Oh, now it's coming on. Now, all of a sudden, shrinkflation. Oh, now it's $3 a day, $90 a month. Would you rather be younger or feel better with a Starbucks coffee? And the answer is you would rather feel better. No, you would rather look better. And you would rather look better. I don't know. I feel terrible, but I look great. Yeah, that's why you're all made up nicely in the coffin. And there it is. $3 a day. There's a business around that. And we are going to talk the business of aging. I don't think Doug's going to go to the funeral home. Speaking of Doug Lynch, he's there. Dr. Yasmeen Nkruman-Elie, who I like to call Dr. Yaz. Why don't you come on up and thrill and amaze us, and at any time, ask those questions.
All right. This is so fun when we get to engage in a different kind of way. So thank you so much, Todd, for the introduction, for the warm welcome. And let's go ahead and get started. So do you have my slides? Or, I can talk off the top of my head.
Do you have a little slide thing?
I get to push the buttons. Okay. So when we were young, and we're getting ready for the Olympics in 100 days in Paris, right? We get really excited about our young athletes and how they feel invincible and they break their knees and they're back playing the next day and just all of those great things. But we're not necessarily thinking about when we turn into our 30s and our 40s and our 50s, how those effects of being invincible actually impact our lives. So we praise that youth, we want that youth, we're excited about it, and we get really excited about the win. But as we age, we start to feel things a little bit differently. We start to feel those pains. And if you talked to me 2 weeks ago with my sciatica, I was here. So if you were on the ground, we would have had a great conversation, but while we were up here. So I'm so glad that I have a wonderful chiropractor. But aging is that deterioration, that progressive deterioration of our bodies and our physiological processes that results in the vulnerability to chronic diseases. And we start to feel it, we start to see it. We might not feel it in our 20s, we might not necessarily see it in our 30s, but in our 40s, here I am. So what we recognize is that aging is unique to the individual. Every single person ages a little bit differently, and really only 25% of that is your genetics. So thanks, Mom, thanks, Dad, I appreciate for your 25%. Where does this other 75% actually come from? And we recognize that that's part of our exposome. So I get to put on my PhD hat, right? So it's everything else that we're doing. All of our lifestyle factors, whether we smoked that 1 or 2 times in high school or 150 times later in college, our drinking, our exercise, our lack thereof exercise, our diet, what did we eat yesterday? Did we have a mimosa just now? All of these different types of factors that actually contribute to how our bodies are functioning, how they're actually responding. So there's some clinical signs of aging that are extremely important, and when we go to the doctors, this is what they're typically measuring. And so we're looking at depression as one of the areas with aging that's of great concern, and hopefully our industry will start to address it a lot more. We're looking at polypharmacy or maybe even polysupplements in terms of how much individuals are actually having to take to modify some of these challenges that their bodies are having. We're seeing the falls. We're seeing the increased risk for different diseases, whether it's cardiovascular or diabetes, more bone fractures, disability, urinary incontinence, ladies know what I'm talking about, and that cognitive decline. And so when we talked about, what is most concerning, our minds. Where did I put my keys? Why did I walk into this room? Who are you? So all of these different areas are extremely important, and our doctors are starting to look at this a little bit differently. We're starting to say, when is aging actually happening? When are we starting to see some of these signs of aging and these different types of effects? And here on the right side, you see a whole list, a whole litany of different mechanisms that are starting to happen, and then what the physiological responses would be. But what's most important for us to remember is that aging starts at the cellular level. So thank you to all of those who cheated and saw my slides ahead of time and voted for cellular health, because absolutely, we recognize that our cells are extremely important to our health, and we have to make sure that we are focusing on the cells. Now, in our industry, that can get really challenging when we're talking to the public. When you start talking about all of these different mechanisms of action, which I'm going to share in a few moments, it can go over some people's heads. There's others that are going to grasp that information with a lot of excitement. But we want to make sure that we have an educated public. And so I'm challenging all of you to get really excited about cell biology. Yay? All right. So 11 years ago, the hallmarks of aging were first introduced. And there was these 9 hallmarks of aging, or molecular mechanisms, that we are starting to see and understand that contribute to this whole aging physiology. So genomic instability, that is related to our DNA. Telomere attrition, so the shorter telomeres, that now is becoming a concern. And how do we address that? Our telomeres, I think the analogy that I absolutely love, I have none on right now, but are shoelaces, right? You have that little plastic at the end of the shoelace, and when that comes off and it starts to ravel, then your shoelace isn't going to work as well. You know, you can't get it through the hole, all of those things. And so telomere attrition is super important because there's been relationships with telomere attrition that actually start with childhood. So those individuals who have had adverse childhood experiences and have those high, it's called ACEs levels, there's great associations that have now been seen in correlations with aging phenotypes earlier. We also deal with epigenetic alterations. Epigenetics is a super exciting idea and theory that we're dealing with right now when we're starting to say, how old am I? I got my chronological age, but what is my biological age? What is my body saying? Is my body saying that I'm phenomenal like Eric over here? Or is my body saying that, oh, I need to, change a couple of things? And so we see these alterations that are happening with our epigenetics, but we also have the opportunity to test some of this. And some of these tests are really giving some great information and are related more to the physiological markers of aging. Proteins is a really important area that we're not talking about enough, I don't think, in our aging spaces yet. And so when we're starting to translate what's happening with our RNA, we have the epigenetics, but what are the protein results? And we know that there's a lot of changes that can happen there. Deregulated nutrient sensing. Our bodies are taking in the nutrients, but are they utilizing them? And we see that with aging, that this may be getting disrupted. That you might take in all the nutrients that you think that you need, and so now we need more research to be able to demonstrate this. And so looking at aging populations, 70 or older is becoming extremely important in terms of this area. Mitochondrial dysfunction is a big one, so we're going to talk about NAD in a few moments, but we know our mitochondria are powerhouses of the cell. You see your biceps? Oh, yes. So our mitochondria are the powerhouses. They're giving us that energy, they're transforming, and we're seeing that as we age, that's deteriorating. Cellular senescence is another area very, very popular. So we think about what happens with cellular senescence. So I'm going to give you the analogy that it is the old gentleman who refuses to retire. He says, I am going to stay at this job forever and ever, and then we have to figure out how do we gently kick you out so that others can come in and do their job. And then stem cell exhaustion, too, is another extremely important area when we're looking at the hallmarks of aging, because when we're younger, our stem cells are like, hey, let's do the Olympics. And then we get a little older, and they're like, hey, we're not going to do the Olympics. And when we have that intercellular communication in terms of what cells are communicating, how they're putting out information. And so we see these hallmarks of aging that have become extremely important. But this was 11 years ago. And so it's been updated, and we know that there's probably some others, and I think this is what's so phenomenal about science is we continue to evolve. And so now there's 3 more. So one is chronic inflammation, and so another term for this would be inflammaging. And so as we age, we're increasing the amount of inflammation that we are seeing. We have all of these different cytokines and chemokines and other markers that are showing us that aging happens with inflammation, and inflammation happens with aging, and so there's this direct correlation. And so if we can start to address inflammation at the molecular level, maybe we can have some more Olympic athletes in their 60s. Dysbiosis is another area, and then disabled macroautophagy. Autophagy has become a wonderful buzzword, particularly with the neurohackers, and they want to make sure they're getting into autophagy, and a lot of that is dealing with that cellular senescence, the old guy that doesn't want to leave quite yet, and making sure that if you still have a function, your body is working in the best ways, but also we're getting rid of those cells that are no longer functioning in the proper way. So this universe of aging and the molecular mechanisms are continuing to expand. And this is giving us in the industry opportunities for different types of targets. But Doug is going to talk about how to translate that a little bit easier as it relates to marketing, because most of these terms aren't things that we talk about at the dinner table. I mean, I talk about telomeres and I talk about nutrient sensing, but do all of people? I don't know, I'm a weirdo. So based on these hallmarks of aging, it has been suggested that we can actually slow down the process. And so here's a picture from Benjamin Button, fun movie, and we know that there's actually people that are dealing with progressive aging diseases such as progeria, types of ataxia. So we know that this is happening, and these are models that we can start to look at. And we're looking at these children, and we want to save their lives. We want to extend that Of course, we're in the supplement space, so we're not necessarily working in those spaces of disease, but these are different models that we can start to think about. How can our supplements, how can our functional foods help in these groups as well when we're thinking about aging? So when we're looking at how do we slow it down, there's certain people say that it can fully be reversed. The science is still out as it relates to humans. But we can start to target those hallmarks of aging, those molecular mechanisms. And there's current interventions such as senolytics, NAD precursors, I'm a champion, as well as caloric restriction, exercise, all of these, we're starting to understand how does this contribute to our aging process, or reducing that aging process, slowing down that aging process. And we hope that our future inventions focus on these molecular mechanisms, and Doug's gonna tell you how to translate what I'm talking about. So there are some select supplements. There's a whole list, so this is not exhaustive by any means when we start to look at healthy aging. And so we know some champions. You guys voted for several of them earlier in terms of omega-3, fatty acids. Vitamins and minerals have been around forever, but we know that the research is continuing to show how they benefit and what are the optimal doses and what time of day we should be taking them and how frequently, et cetera. Collagen is a really nice one. I hope all of us are not adding sprinkles of dust of collagen because that dose is pretty high in terms of what we need. Antioxidants are super important when we start to look at that deterioration, whether it's inflammation or cancer or some other endpoints. Again, not necessarily what we're going to talk about in terms of our claims, but still understanding what some of these mechanisms are as we get into that aging process. Recognizing that aging is usually the #1 predictor for a lot of our chronic illnesses. And so while we do our best to separate ourselves from that in terms of looking at claims, and of course we don't want the FDA or the FTC or NAD, the other NAD, to come after us, but we understand that these are all part of that process. So how do we connect that research? And then there's the probiotics as well as the prebiotics, and I feel like I'm missing another biotic. And so all of these postbiotics, thank you. Yeah, Doug's gonna cover all the biotics. And so we know that there's great beneficial effects from many of these compounds. And again, the science is continuing to develop as well as evolve. So I had fun. Our CEO, Rob Fried, who I love, he challenged our company to say, you have to start using ChatGPT. And so this was my first attempt. Rob, I did my job. Okay, so what are the best strategies for healthy aging? I typed it into ChatGPT, and this is what it told me. I did confirm all of this, so please know ChatGPT was correct in this space for sure. So we know there's lifestyle interventions, regular exercise, our diet, of course, making sure that we're minimizing the toxins that we're putting into our body. Stress is a huge one. Sleep is a good one. Probably not all of us have gotten enough sleep while we've been here. As well as social engagement. So we talked about depression and some of the psychological aspects of aging, and social engagement is truly an important one. When we're looking at preventive health care, we of course want regular medical checkups, et cetera. And then there's those pharmacological interventions. So this is, again, ChatGPT, maybe not our best audience for this. And then there's our emerging therapies. Yay, here we are. And so we're looking at senolytics, we're looking at telomerase activators, and of course, mitochondrial targeted compounds that are helping support our mitochondrial function and production and biogenesis. So an example here, when we start to look at senolytics, there's quite a few different compounds that have been demonstrating their ability to serve as senolytics. And curcumin, okay, fisetin or fisetin, which way are we pronouncing it this week? All right, David Sinclair would say something else. But anyway, quercetin and a whole series of other compounds that are helping as senolytics. How do we get rid of some of these older cells? And the senolytic research is continuing to advance because there's specific biomarkers that are now tested to say, well, actually, is this effective? Is this really working? And so I think there's different arguments on this in terms of, which is most effective, which is the biomarker we actually need to be looking at. But we're continuing to see that there are strategies that we can help get rid of some of these older cells. Then I have to say, one of the champions in this space is NAD. So NAD is essential for every single one of our living cells. And our cells use it for over 300 different processes. And so it's so essential, but we see that NAD can decline with age. Now, there's different thoughts here, and again, the science is continuing to develop, but we do believe that the decrease in NAD is because of the increased accumulation of metabolic insults over a lifetime. So if someone is super healthy, never had any environmental pollution around them, exercises, not too much, but just enough, lives the perfect life, they're doing probably 15,000 steps a day, making sure that they have the mental capacity, that they're meditating, all the things. Who's that person in the room? I was looking for just one. There's one, yes. We're gonna all be your best friends so we can live your lifestyle. But if we see that, then maybe you won't actually see a significant degradation in NAD over lifetime. But that's not our reality. So we have all of these different metabolic insults. We got Mike Tyson punching us out with our diet. We got Holyfield that's knocking us out because of our lack of exercise or our increase in alcohol, or maybe you smoked a little bit in college. I don't know. But because of all of that, we see that our NAD is decreasing over our times. And then we have the increased number of viral insults that we have over our lifetime. All of these things that NAD is actually involved in, once it's getting knocked down, it's like, I'm trying to fight. I'm trying to, right? So we're seeing that decrease, and what we actually want to be able to do is increase and maintain our NAD levels so it can help function in these 300 plus different areas, including DNA repair and cellular senescence and all of these different oxidative reduction reactions. And so it's a fundamental compound that's involved in our metabolic pathways that we need for bioenergetics. So what's also super interesting about NAD is that in the preclinical literature, with nearly all of the hallmarks of aging, you actually see that NAD is involved in them. And so if you guys are interested, I can get you a whole list of the preclinical studies that are outlining each one of these areas. But we see that it's involved in all of these hallmarks of aging in some capacity or another. And even when we start to look at the clinical literature, we're seeing that NAD is essential in the area of inflammation as well. And so we recognize that when we're looking at aging, NAD so far has been the champion when we're addressing these hallmarks. So how can you actually boost your NAD to support healthy aging? There's research that suggests, of course, fasting, a healthy diet, exercise, all of those, inhibiting those NAD-consuming enzymes, and then also supplementation with NAD precursors. When we look at NAD, there's several precursors, so we see some of that redundancy, which then again emphasizes the importance of NAD in our cells and our health. But what we recognize is that because, put on your biochemistry hats, yay. Because there's two phosphate groups with NAD, NAD actually doesn't enter the cell. So it has to release those phosphate groups in order to enter into the cell. And so you see that getting converted first to NMN, which also does not directly enter the cell. It then can get converted into nicotinamide riboside or into nicotinamide to enter into the cell. When we look at what was our first NAD precursor when it became a vitamin and we needed to address a concern, it was pellagra. And so we had niacin, but we know that niacin can also cause flushing. So there's lots of redundancy because of the importance of NAD. And we see certain precursors, particularly nicotinamide riboside and the receptors for nicotinamide riboside, that are increased under certain cellular stress conditions. So going through this list of NAD precursors, and there's some novel ones that we are anticipating seeing more research around. Niacin, again, was the very first one. It also may have benefits as it relates to reducing LDL. Once with the flushing, and that became a concern, the nicotinamide is one that we're going to see a lot more commonly, particularly in our multivitamins. Tryptophan is another one, so yay for the amino acid tryptophan. However, it's really inefficient. So you have to have 60 tryptophan for one niacin equivalence, and so that's a lot of turkey. Nicotinamide mononucleotide I spoke to as well, but that actually has to get converted in order to enter into the cell as well. Nicotinamide riboside so far, when we're looking into the science, seems to be the most effective and efficient in terms of elevating NAD and efficient in terms of the metabolic steps that we're looking at. And we know that there's some newly emerging NAD boosters as well that we're starting to see in the preclinical literature, NAD3, trigonylene, I'm sure I pronounced that one wrong. And then there's some other precursors that we've seen, so NRH and NMNH, that are starting to come out, but the safety behind those still hasn't been fully elucidated. So key takeaways here is that our healthy aging starts at the cellular level. So where does it start, friends? Where does it start, friends? All right, exactly. So our molecular mechanisms, or our hallmarks of aging, result from this deterioration, this progressive deterioration of our physiological processes. It's individual for each one of us. Some of us starts in our teens, unfortunately. Some might not even start into our 50s. But why we start to target these root causes of aging, these molecular mechanisms, we're able to slow down this process. Our healthy lifestyle is a key to healthy aging, and I truly believe that supplements are a part of that lifestyle. And our NAD decline is closely associated with the hallmarks of aging. And so when we're looking at this, NAD right now is a really exciting pathway. But I am looking forward to the science that's also showing beyond NAD and how we can all look at some of these other markers too. So yay for science. Go scientists, let's keep doing this. And of course, to date, so far, NR, nicotinamide riboside, has been shown to be the most efficient NAD booster. Okay, so thank you so much, Todd, for giving me this absolute wonderful opportunity. I have to thank our True crew at Chromadex. We are the makers of True Niagen, so very excited about that. And as a proud member of WIN, go WIN. Thanks.
Dr. Yaz, thank you. I know I feel a little smarter. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, Dr. Yaz with Chromadex. Doug Lynch here. He has been in the industry for 30 years. I've known him for 10. He's now presently, he has his own shingle, MarketWell Nutrition, and he is, Doug, just take it away and impress us.
Okay.
Oh, and also, yeah, get on there and you can ask questions and we'll get to them afterwards.
Thanks, Todd. Well, hello. I want to thank SupplySide East for this invitation, and I want to congratulate everybody in this room. Do you know why? Because you've taken your first step towards longevity. Why? Because intermittent fasting actually can help you, and none of you had lunch today, so you're already on your way, so congratulations. All right, so there we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about marketing the lifespan, or is it the health span? And these are really, really important questions. And is there a difference? And we're going to explore that a little bit today. And, you know, does anybody here, do you have a supplement? Did you launch a supplement ever? Do we have any finished product? When you're holding that supplement in the bottle, what tells you it's a supplement? Trick question. Not really. Supplement facts, that's a good one. Anyone else? Disclaimer? Disclaimer, did we hear? I got a disclaimer for you. All right, so these statements have definitely not been evaluated by the FDA, okay? So ultimately, the FDA or the FTC, whatever I'm about to tell you, I didn't check with them first. I did check with the top FDA attorney. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I expect you to check with your own before you launch a product, okay? I expect it, and don't come running to me if you ultimately get in any difficulty. But that said, there is something going for you, because aging is not a disease. So that point about we're not supposed to diagnose, treat, or cure a disease, aging is not a disease. And that's the important point. It's a fact of life. We're all going through it right now. And if I'm a bad speaker, you're aging incredibly slowly during this process. But it is a promising area for dietary supplements, and I'm going to tell you why. While it's not a disease, it is the gateway. It's the mother of all, I'm going to call them conditions rather than disease at this point. But if you look at people that are age 65 and over, if you look at that little graph, we're getting more and more people into that zone, right? And ultimately, with those people 65 and over, there's a little bit of a problem. The health spending, the healthcare spending in that zone also is going up and up. And also, those other conditions that are associated with that healthcare spending. And so while these sound like diseases, and they are, I'm sure we can translate them into supplement structure function claims pretty well. We're all pros here. But to be sure, the mother of all disease is the aging process. And unfortunately, we've got another problem too. And we call this the silver tsunami. So while we're getting older as a people and we're living longer as a people, largely, we're not, unfortunately, giving enough birth to people that are going to be coming out to pay for our medical benefits as we get older. So this is the problem in a nutshell. We're not giving birth fast enough. And if you actually look, it's gone down in every way. We're flat fertility rate, 30 to 49 years old. There's the rate's the only one that's going up, and it's not enough to compensate. It's just not enough. So the healthcare costs are going up, birth rates are failing, and this is not just a phenomenon here in the USA. In fact, it's actually much worse when you go to other countries. So the thing is, if I were going to tell you personally, I'm going to give you one more quality year of health back to your life, just one, who would take that? Show of hands? One, right? Right? And this has an implication not just for you, it has an implication for your nation. Because there are scientific studies that have been conducted which are showing that anywhere between 3 and 4% of a GDP of a nation will increase dramatically if we give one more healthy year to the population. And that means we're all in for longevity right now, guys. This is the most exciting area, I believe, in nutrition, in dietary supplements, definitely medical foods, and certainly pharmaceuticals as well. Governments are getting involved because they can't pay the bills. But if I were able to give 4 or 5 years back of quality life, and we're talking a 12 to 15% boost in your GDP, we're now starting to be able to afford those healthcare benefits. So that's why governments want it. And also universities, they're great. They're absolutely great, and they're doing some of the most impressive leading things using public and private funds. And there's also private research that are trying to say, how do we extend the health span and the lifespan? Oh yeah. If any of you have a startup and you want to say you're in the supplement space, just talk about longevity. Little secret here. Whatever your supplement does, if you can tie it back to this, investors are going to listen to you. And I mean, you know, the Musks of the world and these guys, the Bezoses, they're investing billions into this, right? So what do they know? Well, they know that this is critically important. So is pharmaceuticals the answer? I come from the pharmaceutical industry a long, long time ago. But I don't believe the pharmaceuticals are the answer to a healthier lifespan and a longer lifespan. They do treat disease, but what did I say at the beginning? Aging is not a disease. They're not set up as a company to deal with those hallmarks of aging that was discussed by Dr. Yaz, right? So ultimately, most definitely, the pharma is in the area. The other thing is drugs tend to go for one target. They make sure that when they go into this large clinical trial, and they're in clinical trials multiple, that they're going to actually work on a certain marker. Well, okay, you can work on that marker, but is that going to extend the lifespan? And that's the key. I mean, cholesterol, we all know it's bad. If you remove it, are you going to live a longer lifespan? So I think the pharmaceutical companies have a real disadvantage here. So if we do the trial and we don't see it, what happens? And then there's this phase 3 study thing. Phase 3 study, when you're involved with that in the drug companies, you have to talk about drug interactions, right? Well, all these interactions from the other drugs that you would be taking as you get 65 and stuff, this is going to have an impact. Ultimately, how are you going to prove that those interactions actually lessen when you're studying people for 20, 30 years to see if they're going to make it? Senolytics, we talked about senescence. I think senescence is a big deal. I also think that drugs that are like taking a very heavy pound bomb and dropping it on one house, okay? And so we don't know exactly what senescent cells do. We think they're taking up space. If you eradicate them all, what's that going to do? So I find that the supplement answer that has an answer to senescence generally is a little more gentle on the way it's handling those senescent cells. And it's definitely going to be an issue. Okay, so what is lifespan extension? What does it mean? So you've got lifespan is your health span, so your healthier years of life. And then you hit this point, it's the point of morbidity, and it all goes downhill from there. All right, so that's the normal human lifespan. If we are trying to talk about extending lifespan, there's a few ways that we are theorizing we can do it. The first thing is that you live your normal life, and then you start to get a little sick, and we start to give you a little drug, and the drug makes you feel better, or maybe not, and we're just going to keep you kind of alive and alive and alive, and then finally you go. I don't know about you, but I have no intention or desire to extend my life if it means I'm going to be in a home or in a wheelchair or on a breathing apparatus, okay? That to me is not life extension. That's called torture, okay? The other way we really want to look at this is if we can extend that lifespan, extend that health span, and then when the morbidity point hits, by moving it to the right, you go quick. You go quick. So there are going to be discussions on nutraceuticals that do that. There already are. If you look at it, there's one out there that absolutely talks about showing a compression of morbidity. Most definitely, that's an area that science is going to be in, and we're here to play. The other thing is health span itself. So if you can just increase your healthier years a little bit longer, and then do that compression of morbidity, that's your gold ticket, okay? That's your printing machine of money, if you're able to come up with a substance that does that. So if you do extend that lifespan, how do you talk about it? How do you actually discuss this to a customer base that is valuing your comments as being legitimate and trusting your brand? These are theories. A theory does not substantiation make. If you're going to say it, you better substantiate it. So I will say there's a whole concept of looking at lifespan as a way to kind of de-risk your clinical trials, because there are ways to screen to see if you can extend the lifespan of very, very simple organisms, right? And C. elegans is one of them. It's a little worm, little tiny worm, loves to eat bacteria. So the discussion about probiotics and postbiotics, they love eating bacteria. So if you can, and they don't last very long. They only last about 13, 14 days. So if you can feed them a probiotic or a postbiotic, a prebiotic, and then they actually double their lifespan, that's a good indication. That's a good indication that you're on the right track as a company. And so there's a Wake Forest University, their medical college, they actually found a postbiotic. It's actually in the infant gut. They screened it, they isolated it, and they brought it all the way down. And they found that, yes, indeed, it actually increased the C. elegans 40% lifespan, which is a pretty big deal if that translates to human beings when we go back to that GDP question, right? The other thing about the C. elegans, which is kind of cool, is that they actually have a health span indicator too. You can actually measure their muscle thickness and the like. So you can actually see their movement, their muscles. You can see a healthy one is up at the top there, and as it gets older, it starts to lose that muscle tissue. So there's an indication that health span improves and lifespan improves. And what that ultimately means is we start to take it beyond the little single invertebrate. What are we talking about human beings? Well, I'm going to take you through that process a little bit, but before I do, there's other organisms that you can do these screenings with. Yeast, fruit flies, mice, you're going to see all of these. And then the only problem is if a yeast lives longer, how do we dose that thing to a human being, right? We are not in the business of making yeast stronger. Maybe that's the beverage industry. Maybe that's the beer industry. I don't know. The gold standard of these types of studies is our little friend Mickey Mouse. The reason why, he shares an awful lot of our own DNA, and more importantly, we know in the mouse we can map pretty much back to the human where these gene clusters are, we can actually match, and we can actually see one for one, almost a replication. So the mouse is great. It lives 3 years. So if you're going to double the life expectancy of a mouse, be prepared to clean a mouse cage for 4 or 5 years. And that's pretty expensive. And I'm going to tell you right now, some of the studies that my companies have run are more expensive than human trials to keep mice alive for that amount of time and see when they die. So, but it's a way to do it. But then there are other questions. Do we take a genetically similar mouse, an identical mouse, or do we take a wild type? Sounds like a strange question, because you can order up all the same genetically similar mice, right? I got hung up on publication for a clinical trial for 2 years because one examiner insisted that they were genetically identical for us to make any type of claim to get published in a pretty large publication. But we were like, no, I mean, we're not all the same genes here, right? We're all different. We're all different here. And so getting a wild type made more sense. I was arguing until I was blue in the face. In the end analysis, we prevailed, but we didn't prevail in that publication. We had to go to somebody else. The other thing is the chronically aged mice can be compared. Now, you can order up mice that are senior citizens in their own right and then see what happens and intervene with them. And you'll see some studies that I can share with you even afterwards that actually do that. And it's pretty profound. You can compare them to when they were young and virile mice and see that we're actually returning them back to that state. So I'm a big fan of mice, as you're going to find. Now, as you do this work, you can get patents, okay? You can say that you've extended lifespan. You can say these things in the patent itself. And all of this starts to come into little s substantiation. There's substantiation with the S on the product, and then there's the little s, which is it's a big world out there, and this news gets out, okay? It gets out. If you have that IP, you then can actually, if you're really good about it, you can have universities. You can find universities that already are sitting on this IP. And that's kind of what I do. I find universities that are sitting on the IP. And ultimately, they're going to defend it. So a patent is good, but ultimately, it's only as good as somebody's willing to defend it. And universities are really good at defending it. So look out there at your local university if you're in product development and you're looking for a longevity product. They might be sitting on one right next door. And then the other thing is that you will have, through this process, the people, when you publish, they're going to be key opinion leaders. They're going to speak. They're going to start talking. And then you're going to do a press release as a company. And you're going to talk about this key opinion leader that's addressing a large group of people about lifespan enhancing. And all of this is starting to come into little s substantiation, all right? Because the word gets out that you're into this research. I say blame Canada. If there's any Canadians here, I'm sorry. Your system by which you have to pre-market approve things before you sell is very annoying to me as a marketer. It's very annoying. But it's also a gold mine, because once you get those claims that almost sound like drug claims, you can do a press release here in the United States about how the government of Canada just endorsed your wonderful life-extending technology. That's a little secret that I'm letting you guys know on things that can be done to start to communicate back to the consumer that ultimately is the most important. And yeah, the web's a big place, right? It's a World Wide Web. So you can put things on the web, especially hosted in other countries, about your amazing research. And that's pretty much a legal way to go. So you can start to tell the story of lifespan and health span. And as you start to really mount up this information, now we look for the clinical trial. Are we going to, as a company, follow a group of people for the next 30 years and see if they live longer? That's not going to be very inexpensive, is it? No, it's not. But ultimately, once you have the patents, once you have the IP, you can invest in your clinical trial. How do we substantiate longevity? The first thing we need to talk about is two types of aging: chronological aging versus biological aging. Okay? I'm sure you've heard about it, but well, if you haven't, I'll kind of go over the high points. So we're talking about cellular health. This is the essence. How old do your cells really think you are? Okay? Ultimately, this is biological aging. Other things about biological aging is your fitness, your decisions in life, good ones and bad ones. These things can, over time, impact your biological age. How well is your body functioning versus a younger person? This is a key point of biological age. And unfortunately, remember those hallmarks of aging? We're going to see them again. We're going to see them again. What markers? What are the markers that actually will lead you to where you can start to say you're impacting that hallmark of aging? What is the scientific consensus? But I have to tell you, from a biological age perspective, this was my preferred way as a marketer to start to talk about, does this supplement do something? It's a number that you can see change in a group of people. So it's a really good indicator of way to go. Here they are. I mean, ultimately, let's talk about genomic instability. What kind of structure function claims are we talking about for genomic instability? Anybody want to take a guess? Supports healthy aging, right? It's like kind of like the immunity, right? Supports a healthy immune system. Yeah, I'm going to sell a lot of products like that. It's going to support your immune system. I think you're right. You're absolutely on the right target there, that you can say that and you should lead with that, because consumers, that's what they want, right? Ultimately. But then you can say things, if you have the data, that it supports a, DNA repair. Cosmetic companies do that all the time, right? You see them, they're bold. Supports a healthy DNA replication process. That sounds really scary, but it sounds cool too. And the same buyers that are looking for this type of life hack, they're looking for that kind of stuff, right? Epigenetics, definitely that's a key area of what we do, and why two twins can have the identical genes and yet look very different. And that's all epigenome. It's all those other things that we're doing. So every one of these things, after the show is over, and I'm not standing here like a target, I might be willing to tell you a couple of ways on how I would do a structure function on these things. But that's one example. Oh yeah, did I? Yep. Okay, so, but ultimately, these universities, let me see, did I go back? Let me see, yep, okay, cool. Those universities that I mentioned before, they can do long-term studies. They can, and they're sitting on this IP, and they're protected, and they're doing it. Are you aware of it? So I'll tell you one group, this University of South Florida, the Center for Microbiome Research. Those guys down there are convinced that your age is your gut. And ultimately, the ultimate biological marker, the ultimate hallmark for aging, is your gut itself. And so they're actually running a 17-university study as we speak, and they're doing it for 5 years. And the whole purpose is to take your gut microbiome and attach it to an age and say, if you're 30, your biome should look like this. And then if you're 30 and your biome looks like an 80-year-old, it's time to do something, and do something fast. So that's the kind of work that's being done in this Miyagi-B study, and I can tell you a little bit more after if you're interested. All of that, by the way, is the purpose is for intervention. So once we have thousands of people in those studies, and we know they're in bad shape, we can start to take your supplements that you're developing, and put them into these populations, because everyone in the study has already identified that they want to live longer. Okay? So if you've got something to say about one of the conditions that is a bad marker connected to the gut-brain axis, we can talk to you. And so here we get to the last part of the talk about the substantiation. It's going to get a little bit legal, and I'm sorry about that. I went to a top industry lawyer, and you'll see him and you'll recognize him probably. The question was, he put back to me if I had data that showed telomeres were actually preserved by taking a dietary supplement. And I had a human trial and double-blind, placebo, all the kind of beautiful things we all try to do, right? The problem is, he asked could that same person drop dead of a stroke tomorrow? And the problem is you have to be really careful if you're inferring that you take this supplement that you're going to live for 20 more years, right? Inferring, not even stating. This could potentially get you in a big, deep puddle to trudge through, right? So how do we get around it? Let's talk about chronological aging. Well, this is one I didn't think was going to be really actually clinically trialed, because it's your age. It's how many times you've gone around that sun. And it's a number that ultimately, it doesn't change for you, okay? It only just keeps going up, right? But the key is, it's a constant, right? The key is, because we all have this unchanging number, it's a constant. So ultimately, if we can compare your chronological age and your biomarkers, your hallmarks of aging, to that subset of people, not to get too complicated, and then compare it to a younger group of people, this information could set you free as a marketer. And this is a way you could actually develop a clinical trial. So ultimately, if you're able to do this, you're able to substantiate, and we might have to go back to that health span and lifespan definition again. How are we merging all four of these things into a topic that's going to get us, number one, safe from the FDA, number two, safe from the FTC, and number three, a consumer can understand it. So let's go. Call the lawyer. All right, so Todd, some of you know Todd with Venable. First thing Todd is when you tell him that you would like to make a longevity claim, he coughs, and that tells you you're probably on the wrong track. But Todd is very, very practical. I mean, and Todd gave me a series of slides. It's his birthday. His chronological age has gone up one today, or he would probably be here in person. His guidance is understand the standard for substantiation. All right. And inferring a life well lived is fine if you have the science backing it up. But here's the problem, guys. Making a fruit fly last 4 days instead of 2 is not a claim, okay? So be super, super careful. It's not a substantiation that's gonna work. Oh, it's important. It brings that little less substantiation, but it's not gonna take the ones that matter. You could do a short-term double-blind placebo-controlled study. And ultimately, just keep in mind, chronological age, it is your age, it is a constant. You can make those comparisons, and it happens all the time. Somebody always says, you look 10 years younger. There are substantiated ways to make that. And it's a lawyer, so he keeps going. But I'll make it very, very quick. Just keep in mind that if you promise a longer life on that label, you're going to probably run into a problem. So what now? Go ahead, work on a clinical trial that links chronological age to those biomarkers. There are the cohorts that you can look at. Do a 12-week study and compare methylation, one of the hallmarks, and then you're going to be on strong footing. And then here you finally have a chronological age number, a biological age number, and ultimately markers. That's substantiation, people. And that's how you're going to do it, if you're going to do it. So get the word out, tell the story, and ultimately, hopefully coming soon, Todd and me will likely give a longer topic on the subject. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel like my chronological age has aged an hour in the last hour, but biologically, maybe only 45 minutes. So we have a lot of questions here and not a lot of time to get to it, so we might go a couple minutes over, and so if you need to split at noon or at 1, that's okay. A couple questions came in on the same thing regarding pets and other animals. And so, Doug, some people have mice for pets, like Willard, but what about dogs? Do these anti-aging life extension things, can they also be correlated to pets?
Well, I'll take that first step. Yes, in many ways it can. That thing, that postbiotic we were talking about, they're trying it in horses right now, because 5 to 6 times the human dose. So we like that as marketers because it's a lot of volume of raw material of ingredients. And ultimately, if we can improve the health span of a horse and a lifespan, you're talking millions and millions of dollars are implicated there. So yes, and dogs, everybody loves a dog.
Right.
Yeah, there's the dog aging project too, which, shout out to that work that's being done there. And I think they're going to start to tease through this as they're looking at different ingredients as well to support our friendly companions.
Cool. So how can a person assess their level of aging? I mean, is this a genetic test that people do, or you just look at your crow's feet, or what?
So my crow's feet are strong, but I still, doing well. But I actually think there's a lot of different tests. So when we go into our doctor's office, there's the physiological test that you may do. Honestly, I think the best one right now is VO2 max. And so get on the treadmill. I'm so sorry that they have the nose thing, the head thing, for all of those sensitivities. But I think VO2 max is our number one right now. And then there's a whole series of other ones. There's the epigenetic marker tests that you have as well. There's indications like if you're starting to develop a chronic illness, then that's probably not the great path that you want to be on, and how can we start to reverse that? And so we see these physiological tests, but then there's also the development of some of these biological tests. The science, I think, is going to continue to grow. So I anticipate 10 years from now, when we look at all of these different, 16 maybe hallmarks of aging, we'll have different tests for each one of those, blood biomarkers and home tests, et cetera.
Yeah, interesting. Doug, here's a question. What was the dose of that C. elegans study? You remember that?
The C. elegans study, well, it translates to, in the human dose, I'm not trying to treat C. elegans and keep them alive longer. By the way, that model is absolutely published, so that you can find it when the C. elegans, but the postbiotic, it translates to 50 milligrams per day in human.
Cheap. Oh, and follow up, VO2 max, that measures just the body's capacity to take in oxygen?
Yes, the oxygen capacity and our exercise capability as well. Yes.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Here's another dose question. Recommended collagen dose related to longevity. I know I'm a big fan of Verisol, which is a peptide, and it's 2.5 grams, but there's other.
I think the science is still developing in terms of what's the perfect dose for collagen, but I'd say the fairy dust isn't counting at all, and we're probably looking deep into the gram doses, maybe even north of 5 to 10.
Right.
Whoa.
Right. Okay, so here's we have a flurry of questions coming in around NAD+, and so how early should we start supplementation? Is it safe for everyone?
So there haven't been many safety studies, so I'm going to put on like that slight regulatory hat I have yet so far as it relates to children. So we have not seen a lot of the children's studies that have been conducted, but I will say personally, I have 2 children, and they take nicotinamide riboside every single day at 300 milligrams of a dose. And when we look at, how old is too old, how old is too young, what's the ideal age? Really, it has a lot to do with those metabolic insults. And so I think it's going to be at an individual level that we start to see what doses are working best for everyone. And as we have more tests, the data will start to come forward as to when we want to optimize dosing and when is the best age to start. But if you're in your 20s now and you had that mimosa today, go ahead and pop some.
And so when taking supplements like niacinamide, is the dosing better multiple times a day?
Ooh.
Like 50 milligrams?
So again, I think within the clinical spaces, we haven't gotten too many studies that have done the multiple times per day. There's a couple that have it twice per day or BID. When we look at some of the mouse studies and we have it in the feed, we know that they're nibbling all day, right? So it's almost like they're microdosing. I'm from Colorado. And so we see that. But we don't necessarily replicate that in the clinical trials, because who's going to want to take something 4 or 5 times per day, right? So I think there's still some evidence that's coming through that, and stick packs and some other delivery packet ways that you can just add it to your water may be solutions when we're starting to look at translating what we're seeing in our mice models or our rat models into humans.
So food is great, and I'm going to get some good Italian in the city tonight, so I'm really excited about that. But then there's this thing called intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. And so, what price paradise? What is the science around it? Do we really want to stop eating in order to live longer? Are we just going to live longer but not better?
So I do believe that intermittent fasting is an important strategy to help with longevity. So there's already been evidence that caloric restriction, that when you see that, you're seeing people live longer. When we look at the blue zones, a lot of them are already practicing intermittent fasting. I think even culturally, when we look at some of our ancestors, they weren't necessarily eating 3 times per day. They might not have been living as long because they might have died from typhoid fever or something else. But what we do see is we haven't always been a 6 times a day species. And so I think there's some great potential there. We do see that NAD levels do increase with fasting. And so, I think that this is something we should consider. Have a great Italian meal, enjoy it, have your salad.
I can have some resveratrol with that too, if you know what I'm saying.
Go ahead and have that red wine, but you probably, only want to have one really big meal per day. And so we'll continue to see where the science takes us.
Yeah, very quickly, I would just say that as a species, these mechanisms were super important to survive droughts and periods where food wandered away. So if you could keep the population living longer to breed again and to have children, ultimately that's what you're tapping into, that mechanism. And it's fascinating, but it would be great if we could, through a supplement, trigger that and not have to go through the process.
Because that was the whole thing with resveratrol at the beginning, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's the fasting mimetic compounds, so yes.
Yeah, right. So can you comment on the regulatory landscape of some of the newer and more novel ingredients? For example, NMN, which the FDA said doesn't qualify, but then they also said the same thing about CBD, and that hardly stopped the market. And fisetin, or fisetin, if you're a Sinclair, that exist in a bit of a gray area in that area.
Yeah, so it's really interesting when we're dealing with drug preclusion. And as someone who's in the industry, and even our CEO wrote about this in terms of, how do we regulate ourselves? The drug preclusion, I think, is a challenge for our industry, right? Because we don't know who's filing these INDs and when. And so that, really gets us into a challenging space when we're starting to develop a product, and then we go in and we're doing our NDIN, and then it's like, no. Or in the case of NMN, they went in, there was already, the IND, so the investigational new drug application that had been submitted by one company, and then you have this other company. Apparently the FDA doesn't talk to each other, because it was like, yes, you can have this NDIN for NMN. Oh, wait, let's backtrack. We actually gave an IND before. So it's a really challenging space. But then when we look at the FDA, we say, who is actually regulating this? So legally, NMN is not allowed. It is not allowed to be sold as a dietary supplement. But is the FDA actually regulating this, or is it just Amazon?
I think it's just Amazon at this point.
But the other thing, Todd, is as a marketer, as an evil marketer, I love gray zones. I love gray areas. So
play in the gray.
You go where you have to be, but in many cases, you follow the same rules to get the product first on the market. Is it grass? Is it that type of process? Once you get it there, then you can worry about how to make the claim.
Yeah. We got 2 more questions if everyone could just be patient. Someone that said they work for a genomics company. Many nutritional supplement companies don't have funding for claim validation. How can I convey to them that this is necessary?
Can I talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I love. I'm the director for the Chromadex External Research Program. And when we get questions like that, we look towards academia. So our program, we have over 285 studies that are investigator-driven, third-party funded. So how exciting is that for us as companies? I want more of us in the industry to do something like this, where we find the investigators that are excited about the research. They're going to be the ones that are getting the grants, whether it's institutional, whether it's a foundation, NIH, et cetera, to be able to do that work. And then we are able to develop claims based on the work that they're doing. But because it's investigator-driven and third-party funded, it's not funded by industry, so it has the perception of trust from a lot of different people, and that goes a long way as well. So we want that research to happen. We want to be able to provide our material through material transfer agreements. Come see me. I would love to share what we do more about SERP so that everyone can do it as well, so we can start to get more of these claims from our product as it relates to all of these different hallmarks of aging.
Yeah, that's great, but if you don't have any IP on it, you do. That makes all that possible. So don't forget that step, that you're going to get your patents with those early C. elegans screening type work. Get the patent, then you don't mind if 300 universities do your stuff, because they're not training and doing it for your competitor.
That, and then 2, you want to help those academic partners get IP as well, because I like to make scientists famous and rich. Yeah. And then we want to go ahead and license that IP from them as well.
I am loving this back and forth. We have one more question, and I have to bring it in because clearly someone who's at a trade show and doesn't know how to pace themselves. Are there current studies in the public domain related to NR on alcohol metabolism and symptoms associated to hangover?
So there's some research that's happened as it relates to NR, alcohol-related diseases, NASH, some other effects that we start to see with liver disease as well that may be alcohol reflecting. There have been no clinical studies that have looked at party one day, take NR the next day. Not yet, but if you're a researcher that wants to do it, come talk to me. But yeah, I think there's a lot that's there. We know that with alcohol that we're decreasing our NAD levels, particularly in the liver. Dr. Charles Brenner did some research and was looking at varying degrees of liver damage and saw that with increased liver damage, when they did biopsies, they actually did see decreased NAD, so literally a direct correlation there. But we're always looking for opportunities to do more research. So if you want to get drunk one day, and then do the NR the next day, come see me and let's figure out how we can do this and the FDA still approve it.
And dead postbiotics work well in alcohol, by the way. They're not probiotics. So remember us postbiotics people.
Yes.
All right. This was a great and lively conversation. I really appreciate it. Dr. Yaz over here with Chromadex, Doug Lynch here, Market Well Nutrition. I'm Todd Runstead, Natural Products
so
Insider.
much.
Thank you. Enjoy SupplySide West, people. East.